Hey, what's up everybody? This is Ryan with Escotech, and I'm back with my low profile case, the InWin CE685. It's not much to look at, but I love low profile cases and the small footprint that they have. They're not the best at cooling it. If you saw my last video, I've upgraded to a GTX 1650 low profile card. And low profile cards generally run hot anyway, but I'm going to see what I can do to upgrade the cooling in my case to get this card to run cooler. So I've bought that and some other upgrades. I've got some fans, a new CPU cooler, and a new power supply. Stick around and let's see what kind of results we get. Now I'm going to start this video off by saying I had some plans to get some really cool shots. I bought some weather stripping to seal the case and cut it to fit. Then I cut an acrylic sheet so I could see inside, and I was going to try to get some shots internally of the airflow by using a smoke pencil that I picked up on Amazon. I held the acrylic panel on with just some neodymium magnets that seemed to press it onto the weather stripping good enough that it was going to seal nicely. And I was going to run the computer and get some images of some smoke flowing through. Here's a look at the device I was going to use. It's a smoke pencil, and it's just battery operated and runs off some liquid inside, much like a fog machine. You just kind of let it charge and then hold the button down, and it actually produces a decent amount of smoke. But what I found that the fans dissipate the smoke far too quickly to get any useful shots. This device was really meant for leak testing in HVAC applications and not really meant for moving air. The other reason is the liquid on the smoke pencil said it would leave a residue, and just the amount of smoke that I would have to try to use would be way too much. And I also noticed that the main ingredients are glycerin and water, which is the same as most personal lubricants. I'm not one to judge, and maybe some of you are into that sort of thing, but I decided against lubing up the inside of my computer. To each his or her own, but moving on, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at my overall case. And as I said in my last video, I upgraded to the GTX 1650 low profile. The stock heatsink has always bothered me in this computer, as has the power supply that InWin likes to use. And then there's only one 92mm stock fan that came with the case. So I want to solve all those issues with some upgrades and see if we can get some better airflow into this case. A quick look at the full load power use shows we're pulling about 180 watts from the wall, and right in front of the case we're getting about 58 decibels of noise. I'm not a huge snob when it comes to noise, but I want my computer to not be obnoxiously loud. This PC has a Core i7-6700, and running OCCT, both the CPU and GPU jumped very quickly to the upper 80s and lower 90s, with the CPU topping out at 92 degrees Celsius and the GPU hitting 89 degrees, obviously not good. Installing the new CPU cooler will require the motherboard to be taken out completely, so let's go ahead and disassemble everything. For my upgrade parts, I've gone with some Noctua NFR8 Redux fans. I've got two 92mm fans here. We will see how I can use those. I've also got a new Noctua CPU cooler, the low profile NHL9i. I went with the Chromax black because I liked the look of both the black heatsink and black fan. And in classic Noctua fashion, it's got a very nice package, and the CPU cooler is very low profile and has a couple heat pipes in it, so I'm hoping this will be a big improvement over the stock Intel heatsink. Along with being extremely low profile, this cooler also doesn't have any weird protrusions and looks like it should fit within the confines of the normal socket 1150 heatsink setup, and shouldn't be a problem going on basically any motherboard. And finally, the last part, we've got a Silverstone TX 300 watt PSU. It's 80 plus bronze, but it's really the only, or one of the only quality TFX form factor power supplies out there. And as I had mentioned, InWin uses a Powerman brand, house brand. I don't know if they make it or not, but I always felt a little uncomfortable using a cheap PSU just because, as you know, if a cheap PSU blows, you're typically going to lose components behind it, whereas if a good one has issues, it'll usually have some protections in place to save your equipment. And not only am I moving on to a higher quality PSU, I'm also gaining an 8-pin CPU connector, and then this will also have a 6-pin PCI Express if I ever got a graphics card that would need external power. So most of you are probably familiar with a Intel stock CPU cooler and its mounting clips that just kind of push down and into the bracket. But to remove it, all you have to do is rotate these 90 degrees and then pull them loose from the motherboard. Intel's bracket system on these actually works really well, basically one time, and then the clips kind of get finicky and you'll have a harder time pushing them through the motherboard and whatnot. But again, to release, you can just pop them up and then free the heatsink from the motherboard and unplug the fan and make way for our Noctua cooler. The Noctua reinstallation or cooler installation is pretty straightforward. I put a bead of thermal paste on here, and all you have to do is just kind of decide where you want your cable to come out, is to line up with your fan header the best. So I'm just going to go this route to use that when I do the cable management later. You do have to take the motherboard out if you don't have access to the back of your motherboard through your case. Some cases have the window on the back. My low profile one does not. This actually screws in from the back with some nuts, and it's just best to always try to work diagonally so you spread out your thermal paste the most even. And get these 4 screws in, and I'm going to hand tighten them, and then I will tighten them with a screwdriver. Noctua is always very precise with their measurements, so you can basically tighten these all the way, and they will have the right amount of torque on the top of the board for the cooler pressing on your CPU. I'm going to speed up this footage, but basically I'm just going to reinstall the motherboard in the reverse order I did when I took it out with the new CPU cooler installed. And I will also go ahead and install the new TFX power supply. Just 3 screws on the back. And then reconnect all the cables. Now that I've got everything installed, I'm going to take a look at upgrading the fans. Unfortunately, my motherboard only has one case header, which is being used by the 92mm fan at the top right now. So I bought this splitter. I'm going to try to go 1 to 3 fans off that header. We'll see how it works. For another piece of the cooling upgrade, I was able to buy these drive bay covers that had holes drilled in them, and they were actually from another InWin case, so they'll fit exactly in this one. If you've seen in one of my Dell Optiplex videos, I kind of showed that if you're not using your CD drive bay, it can be a pretty big lost opportunity when it comes to cooling. I'm going to go ahead and upgrade the 92mm stock case fan with one of the Noctuas and connect that to the 3-way splitter that I'm going to try to use on the fans. I don't know how well that's going to work, but we will see. I'm also going to go ahead and take this bracket out. I think it's just a brace for a 5 1/4 inch drive that you'd put in here, but we're not going to use an optical drive, and they're kind of a thing of the past anyway, so we're just going to get rid of that completely. Now for testing, I'm just going to kind of go ahead and wedge some fans in here. I'm going to try all 3 of these fans as intake, and then I'm going to try to do a little bit where I kind of build a shroud in the middle and do some testing and see if I can't get something to function as intake and exhaust and see if I can get some airflow through here. Obviously, low profile case, you can't exactly just throw fans on the back, so I will see if I can make any exhaust work, because I think with some exhaust I'll get better cooling results. And finally, I'm going to go ahead and pop off my front panel. It's just got 3 clips that lift, and then I'm going to take out the solid drive bay brackets and get the ones with the holes in them. I'll probably get some sort of air filter material behind them to make them look a little better. But for now, this will just be to test with the maximum amount of airflow coming through these holes. And they will just pop right in. Like I said, they're from another InWin case, so the design actually lines up exactly. The clips on them are exactly the same. Like I mentioned, those big holes don't necessarily look the best, but I think with some foam behind them to filter some air, they'll look just fine. And snap the front panel back on. I'm going to go ahead and slide my case on. I'm not going to worry too much about the wiring. This will just be for testing. So after dozens of runs, I've actually got it where I've got a new fan profile that I sped up the fan just a little bit, and I have gotten some promising cooling here. The best route worked out with all 3 fans set up as intake, and I've got my GPU running in the mid-70s and also the CPU running in the low to mid-70s as well. I'm still not completely satisfied with this, so this is why this video has turned into a 2-parter. I got a great deal on a Core i7-10700 from Best Buy of all places, but I was fully looking at upgrades and expecting to go Ryzen, but this just kind of fell into my lap, so I went ahead and picked that up, and obviously need a new motherboard, so I got a Z490 gaming motherboard. I realize I have a non-K processor, but it'll lead me an upgrade path, and the B&H series motherboards were unusually expensive, and I ended up getting the Z490 for just about 10 bucks more, so I'm okay with it. And I really needed the extra fan headers. I may try to add some exhaust to the case. So stick around, like and subscribe if you want to see part 2 of this, and we'll see if I can get some good cooling in my low profile case. I don't know if there's any other low profile gaming users or creators out there, but if you like the video, be sure to stick around and check out part 2. Thanks.